In the 1960s, one of the most effective spies in modern history lived a double life in plain sight. His name was Eli Cohen, the Israeli intelligence officer who managed to infiltrate the highest political and military circles of Syria. He did not steal safes or hack systems. He built relationships. He listened carefully. He observed routines, habits, patterns. And over time, the information he gathered influenced military decisions and altered the balance of power in the region. Many of you may know this story through the Netflix miniseries The Spy, which dramatizes how intelligence does not always come from dramatic confrontations. More often, it comes from proximity, trust, and patience. Today, trade has its own version of Eli Cohen, but instead of cocktail parties in Damascus, the stage is sports, logistics platforms, custom databases, digital dashboards. Instead of handwritten notes, the intelligence comes from data. And instead of a single spy, there's an entire ecosystem that silently observes how the world supply chain moves. Welcome to the final episode of Circus and Circuit, Unraveling Global Trade podcast. I'm Kate Foronda, and today we close this season by talking about supply chain espionage. However, we will discuss this topic not as a conspiracy theory, but as a structural reality of modern global commerce. This episode is not about illegal hacking or stolen secrets. It's about how information travels, how patterns emerge, and how companies often reveal far more than they realize, simply by doing business in a highly data-driven, automated world. When people hear the word espionage, they usually think about something illegal like hacking computers, stealing documents, wiretapping phones. Those things still exist, but they are no longer the most effective way to gather intelligence in global trade. Today, supply chain espionage is mostly about observation. It happens when operational data is collected, connected, analyzed over time. Every shipment, every customs filing, every port call, every supplier relationship leaves a digital trace. Shipping schedules, freight tracking systems, compliance paperwork, all generate information. Separately, individually, these data points look harmless, but together, they tell a detailed story. They show who buys from whom, how often shipments move, where delays occur, how dependent the company is on certain suppliers, and how flexible or maybe how fragile its logistics really are. These shifts did not happen overnight. 20 years ago, in the early 2000s, much of global trade still relied on paper documents, faxes, emails. Access to trade data was slow, fragmented, limited mainly to customs authorities and to the companies that were directly involved in transactions. 10 years ago, digital systems were spreading, but data was still sealed and difficult to analyze at scale. 5 years ago, cloud platforms, real-time tracking, and advanced analytics changed everything. And today, artificial intelligence can analyze years of shipment history in seconds. Patterns that once took months to detect are now visible almost instantly. And this is why modern supply chain espionage is not about stealing secrets. It's about recognizing patterns before others do. So, who are the new industrial spy in this case? And in most cases, they don't look like adversaries at all. They are already integrated in the global trade ecosystem, operating openly and completely legally. The first group is data aggregators. They are companies that collect massive volumes of trade and logistic data from public and semi-public sources such as custom filings, bill of ladings, vessel tracking signals, port records. Platforms like Panjiva or Import Genius process millions of shipments records every year. Their services are widely used by investors, manufacturers, logistic firms to gain market visibility. On their own, these platforms increase transparency. But combined with advanced analytics, they provide strategic insights into entire supply network. They can show shifts in sourcing, supplier concentration risk, and emerging links across countries and industries. What once required deep insider knowledge is now available through simple subscriptions. The second group is insiders, and this is often the most underestimated risk. Insiders are not often malicious. They are employees of the company, consultants, contractors, brokers, or maybe just partners who share more information than they should, because no one ever taught them that operational details are strategically sensitive. And what is that, operational details? What I mean by that? For example, a forwarded email with suppliers' names, a shared spreadsheet showing volumes and delivery dates, presentation that reused for another client, maybe a casual conversation at a conference, or maybe a LinkedIn post that is announcing a partnership before contracts are finalized. None of these actions feel dangerous in a moment, but together they can reveal pricing structure, dependencies, timelines, strategic priorities, a lot of information. According to IBM's Cost of a Data Breach research, more than 80% of security incidents involve a human element. While this statistics is often discussed in the context of cybersecurity, the same logic applies to supply chain intelligence. The greatest leak are usually behavior, not technical. The third group is digital middlemen. These are systems and service providers that connect modern supply chains. ERP platforms, transportation management systems, custom brokers, freight forwarders, and cloud-based SaaS tools designed to improve coordination and efficiency. And it's companies like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft. All of them sit at the center of global trade infrastructure, and all these systems work exactly as intended, but every integration creates a copy of the data somewhere else. Data does not disappear when it leaves your system. It is stored, backed, analyzed, and sometimes used in aggregated forms for benchmarking or product development. Many companies do not fully understand how long their data is retained or how it may be combined with data from other. And this is growing concern over data visibility, which became one of the reasons why many companies quietly slowed down and stopped large-scale blockchain integration in supply chain. A few years ago, blockchain was promoted as a solution for transparency and trust. In practice, however, many firms realized that full ledger transparency could expose sensitive commercial information such as supplier relationships, transactions volume, pricing, trade routes, and once recorded, that data could not be easily modified or withdrawn. For companies that operate in competitive or geopolitically sensitive markets, this level of permanent visibility created new risks. Instead of protecting trade secrets, blockchain implementation often raised uncomfortable questions about who could access the data, how permissioned the system truly was, and where strategic information could be inferred, concluded over time. As a result, many organizations choose to limit blockchain pilots, keep them internal, or abandon them altogether in favor of more controlled, centralized systems where data exposure could be managed more selectively. In other words, the issue was never the technology itself, it was the realization that in global trade, efficiency and transparency must always be balanced against strategic discretion. One of the clearest examples is TradeLens. TradeLens is a blockchain platform that was launched by Maersk and IBM. It promised transparency and efficiency, but it was eventually shut down in, I think, 2023, because competitors were uncomfortable sharing sensitive shipping data on shared ledger. The concern wasn't hacking, it was visibility. The final group here is state-linked observers. Governments are increasingly mapping supply chains for energy security, food security, critical minerals, pharmaceutical, and advanced technologies. Their focus is not usually on individual companies, but on ecosystems. Understanding who supplies whom, through which routes, and under what relations, it's kind of help them determine and create trade policy, impose sanctions, and overall develop industry strategy. What makes all this so effective is that is very seldom it feels like espionage. It feels like normal, routine business. For decades, efficiency was a priority in global trade. Faster shipping, lower cost, better coordination, leaner inventories. Going digital achieved those goals by reducing frictions and enabling companies to scale across borders at cosmic speed. But efficiency has a hidden cost. The same systems that allow companies to track every container in real time also allow others to reconstruct their operational logic. The same dashboards that improve risk management create data exposure that can be analyzed externally. The system became highly efficient and as a result, highly observable. So why does matter more than ever in upcoming years? Looking ahead, supply chain espionage is becoming stronger, not weaker. Artificial intelligence makes it easy to spot patterns in trade data. Digital models of supply chain allows companies and governments to test disruptions before they even happened. At the same time, global politics has become more divided, pushing governments to watch supply chains more closely. Sanctions and compliance rules are now used as economic tools, not just legal ones. Trust in long-term partnerships is also declining, and companies spread their risks by working with more suppliers, moving faster, and keeping options open, and loyalty is no longer guaranteed. In this environment, information becomes power. The real risk is not visibility itself, but failing to understand what that visibility reveals about your business. So the goal here is not secrecy, and it's not about paranoia. The goal here is awareness. And what to do in this case? A great question. And here is a few simple steps that can be done. At first, protection starts with information discipline. Not everyone needs to know everything. Vendors, consultants, partners should receive only the data necessary to perform their specific role. Data minimization is not inefficiency, it's resilience. Companies also need to invest in cultural awareness. Employees must understand that suppliers' name, shipment volumes, delivery timelines, all this is sensitive information. Posting deals online before they are closed is not transparency, is exposure. Operational details have strategic value far beyond daily tasks. Most importantly, leadership must treat supply chain security as a strategic issue, not just an IT or compliance concern. It directly affects negotiations, pricing power, market entry, and long-term positioning. And this is the point where theory intersects with brutal reality. Small and mid-sized companies often believe they are too small to matter, but in practice, they are often the easiest to observe and the easiest to extract information from. One of the most common entry points is a request for proof of past performance. In small and mid-sized firms, many sourcing agents recognize this pattern. For example, some Chinese buyers often request bill of lading from previous shipments while promising large future orders. In many cases, the primary objective is not to buy, but to collect intelligence. A bill of lading reveals far more than shipment history. It can expose original suppliers, producers, logistic routes, volumes, commercial relationships. Once that information is shared, the intermediary often becomes unnecessary. Because of this practice, many US and Canadian brokers are cautious when responding to such requests. They have seen situations where intermediaries are used as white horses, temporary fronts to gain access to supplier networks. Once the information is obtained, the original agent is bypassed. This has created a trust gap and explains why many Western brokers refuse to share historical shipping documents without strong contractual protection. And I have shared these examples from my own professional experience. Over years, I have seen the same pattern repeat themselves across different markets and commodities, and I know for sure that many of my colleagues who may be listening to this episode can agree with me. And they also could easily provide dozens of similar examples from their own work. Well, no system leaks information on its own. People do. And there are many reasons why it happens. Sometimes people want to be helpful, or they are under pressure, or maybe sometimes they simply do not realize the value of what they are sharing. As I mentioned earlier, rational systems often collide with human behavior. Intensives, trust, ego, fear, all these frame outcomes just as much as algorithms do. The most effective intelligence gathering today understand this very well, just as famous spy Eli Cohen did decades ago. Global trade has always been competitive, but today the battlefield is far more sophisticated. The winners will be the most aware. They understand that information moves just as powerfully as physical commodities. And awareness is power. As Francis Bacon said centuries ago, knowledge itself is power. In global trade, that has never been more true. Dear listeners, thank you for being with me, for listening, for thinking, and for questioning the systems that shape our world. This was Circus Circuit, Unraveling Global Trade podcast, and your host, Kate Foronda. And until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and never stop learning. Because in global trade, the unseen often matters more than the visible.